He knew the exact time, before anyone else did. Welcome to Mystery Case. I am your host, Detective Echo. Comment your country below. I love seeing you here. Let's open the case. Nero Wolfe refuses clients the way a banker refuses counterfeit, without a flicker of regret. I've seen him do it to people who could buy the block we live on. That Tuesday, around 4:15, he tried it on a stranger who looked like he'd been wrung out by the February sleet. The bell at the front door gave one sharp tinkle. Fritz was in the kitchen building what Wolfe calls a civilized dinner, so I left my desk and opened up myself. The man on the stoop was 40-ish, neat and damp at the shoulders. He held his hat like he didn't trust it. His eyes kept jumping past me toward the stairs, as if the house had ears. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. Depends." "My name is Wallace Rook. I wrote yesterday. What's the trouble, Mr. Rook?" He leaned in an inch, lowering his voice. "I have an appointment with Mr. Wolfe." "I'll decide that." I stepped aside and let him in, and we went to the front room. Wolfe sat in his red leather chair, a finger marking his place in a book. His eyes came up, took the visitor in, and returned to the page as if Rook were a draft. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "this is Wallace Rook. He says he has an appointment." Wolfe didn't look at me. "It is incorrect." Rook swallowed. "Mr. Wolfe, I did write." "You wrote to my secretary." Wolfe's voice was smooth. "I have no secretary. Therefore you wrote to a fiction. I will not indulge you." Rook's annoyance showed for half a second, then vanished. He produced a folded paper from his coat. "I wrote to Mr. Goodwin. This is a copy." I took it, saw my name and our address, and a closing line that offered discretion and a fee. It had been mislaid, probably by Fritz, who files paper according to culinary relevance. I carried it to Wolfe. He read 3 lines and gave Rook a fraction more attention, which from Wolfe is an event. "You state," he said, "that you possess information of a death." "Not information," Rook said. "Knowledge." "Knowledge," Wolfe repeated. "Of whose death?" "A man named Calvin Storrs." The name meant nothing to me. Wolfe let his eyes rest on Rook, then turned a page, which was his way of waiting. Rook hurried on. "Calvin Storrs is a collector. Clocks, rare timepieces. He lives on West 72nd. He will die today." I let out a short laugh. "You got a timetable?" Rook didn't smile. "Nonce at 8:17 this evening." Wolfe's book closed with a soft thump. That got my full attention. Wolfe doesn't close a book unless he's offended or intrigued, and he wasn't offended yet. "You are suggesting," Wolfe said, "that you can predict a precise moment of death." "I don't predict, I know, and I need your help." Wolfe's lips barely moved. "You require a physician." "I require you." Rook's hands trembled. "If I go to the police, they will assume I intend harm. If I do nothing, He stopped, jaw working. "I can't carry it." "Carry what?" I asked. Rook's gaze fixed on the grandfather clock in the hall, the one Wolfe complains about because it ticks too loudly. "Time," he said. "The time of death." For a moment, the room felt as if someone had opened a door on a dark stairwell. Wolfe spoke quietly. "Mr. Rook, yes, you're either insane, impertinent, or in possession of a fact that will disturb my household. The last is unforgivable." "Then forgive me later," Rook said. "Right now, listen. 8:17. If you let me stay here until then, I can prove it without endangering anyone." I started to object. Wolfe doesn't take guests without notice. But Wolfe lifted a hand. His eyes were on Rook, but I could tell his mind had already left the room and was examining something else. "You will tell me how you know," Wolfe said. "In detail. You will not lie, and you will not touch anything in this house. Archie, ring Saul Panzer." I blinked. Saul, this early, with dinner still ahead? That meant Wolfe had done what he never admits. Taken the case for a reason he wouldn't share, at least not yet. Rook exhaled as if he'd been holding his lungs hostage. Thank you. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Do not thank me. You have just brought a clock into my brownstone, and I detest clocks. I went to the phone in the hall, but even while dialing Saul, I watched Rook in the mirror over the umbrella stand. He wasn't theatrical. There was no flourish, just a tight, private panic, like a man who has swallowed a watch and can feel it ticking. Wolfe sat immobile, hands folded on his stomach, eyes half-lidded, already in command of a situation he hadn't yet named. From the kitchen came Fritz's clatter and the smell of browned butter. Ordinary peace, now under notice. When Saul answered, I said, Saul, come to the brownstone. Wolfe has a visitor who claims to know the exact time a man will die. Saul whistled and said he was on his way. Saul Panzer can cross Manhattan faster than gossip. But even he needed 20 minutes. In that time, Wallace Rook sat on the yellow chair opposite Wolfe's desk and explained why 817 had lodged in his skull like a nail. Calvin Storrs, he said, was not merely a collector of clocks, but a tyrant of them. He bought 18th-century marine chronometers, Viennese regulators, carriage clocks that had ticked in Napoleonic campaigns. He restored them, calibrated them, and then, according to Rook, imposed his will on them. I've worked for him 3 years, Rook said, cataloguing acquisitions, arranging private sales. He trusts no one else with the records. And yet, I put in, he confides his hour of demise to you. He didn't confide it. Rook's hands gripped his hat again. He announced it. Wolfe's eyes were closed. That didn't mean he was resting. It meant he was constructing. Nay, 2 nights ago, Rook continued, Mr. Storrs hosted a small dinner, 4 guests, investors, rivals, admirers. He calls them disciples. I was present to document a demonstration. Demonstration of what? I asked. A clock. A French skeleton clock, late 19th century. He claimed it had been modified. Wolfe's lids lifted. Modified in what manner? Rook hesitated. He said it would mark more than ours. That is vague, Wolfe murmured. It was theatrical. Rook snapped, then steadied himself. Storrs enjoys performance. He gathered us in his gallery. The skeleton clock was displayed under glass. He wound it himself. Then he said, observe closely, at 8:17 p.m., precisely 48 hours from this moment, this clock will chime once, and I will be dead. The room held that. I said, and everyone applauded. No, Rook's voice dropped. They laughed, except one. Who? Wolfe asked. Dr. Evelyn Voss. She restores antique mechanisms. Brilliant. She told him not to be obscene. Obscene? Wolfe repeated. Yes, she thought he was staging some elaborate prank. Storrs insisted he was not. He said the mechanism was perfected, that he had calculated the end. Calculated? I said. What is he, an astronomer? Rook looked at me sharply. He believes time is a structure. If you understand the structure, you can predict its collapse. Wolfe made a small sound in his throat that might have been contempt. Time requires no assistance to collapse. Rook ignored him. After the announcement, the dinner dissolved. The guests left unsettled. I stayed behind. I asked him what he meant. And? Wolfe prompted. He said, Wallace, as you above all should appreciate the symmetry. Then he dismissed me. Symmetry, I said. Did he have a flair for Greek tragedy too? Rook's eyes flashed. You don't understand. Yesterday morning I went to his townhouse to retrieve a ledger. He was in his study, calm, cheerful. He confirmed the time, 8:17 tonight. He said I should be present to witness the fulfillment. And you believed him, Wolfe said. Rook swallowed. I believe something will happen. Saul arrived then, stepping in without ceremony. He took in Rook with one sweep and nodded to Wolfe. You rang, boss? Yes. Sit. Wolfe indicated a chair without looking. Mr. Rook asserts that a man named Calvin Storrs will die at 8:17 this evening. We are to prevent either the death or the assertion. Saul's brows lifted a millimeter. That's specific. So I gathered, I said. Wolfe turned to Rook. List the 4 guests. Rook did so carefully. Dr. Evelyn Voss, Leonard Crail, financier, recent partner in several acquisitions. Miriam Holt, collector, rumored to be negotiating purchase of Storrs' Viennese regulator. And Thomas Dane, nephew, only living relative. Relationships among them? Wolfe asked. Tense. Crail wants majority control of the collection. Holt wants specific pieces and resents Storrs' refusal to sell. Dane expects inheritance. Voss believes the clocks should be in museums, not private vaults. Wolfe's fingers steepled. Motives then abound. Yet you bring this to me not as fear of murder, but as fear of prophecy. Rook's composure cracked. Because he knew the time before anything occurred, he said it calmly, as if it were already written. I leaned against the desk. Did he seem ill? No. Depressed? No. Fond of melodrama? Yes, Rook admitted, but not like this. Wolfe addressed Saul. Go to West 72nd, discreetly. Observe the townhouse. Note arrivals and departures, particularly of the 4 named individuals. If possible, ascertain the arrangement of the premises. Study, gallery, servants. Saul nodded. And if something's cooking? You will not taste it, Wolfe said dryly. You will report. Saul left as quietly as he had come. Wolfe returned to Rook. You will remain here until 8:30. Archie will accompany you back to Mr. Storrs' residence at 7:45. Why? I asked. Because, Wolfe said, if a man announces his own death to an audience of rivals, either he is a fool or he is baiting a trap. I wish to know which. Rook stared. You think he intends to provoke someone? I think, Wolfe replied, that any declaration tied to a precise minute is an instrument. The question is, who is meant to hear it strike? The hall clock ticked, loud as a metronome. I glanced at it and wished we'd had it muffled years ago. Rook leaned forward. You believe he might not die? I believe, Wolfe said, that certainty regarding the future is arrogance. Arrogance invites correction. And if he does die? Rook whispered. Wolfe's gaze hardened. Then the man who knew the time will interest me very much. That left Rook blinking. It left me too, because the way Wolfe said it made the room feel smaller. Fritz appeared at the doorway, affronted by the disruption of his schedule. Dinner at 7, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe inclined his head. Naturally. Rook looked between us. You're going to dine? Wolfe's eyes widened a fraction. Mr. Rook, unless you intend to expire at 8:17, my dinner remains inviolate. The tension snapped just enough for me to breathe. But underneath it, steady as the hall clock, was the approach of a minute none of us owned. Dinner at 7 proceeded with the solemnity of a treaty signing. Wolfe consumed shad roe with browned butter and a salad assembled to demonstrate Fritz's moral superiority to the rest of Manhattan. I ate efficiently. Wallace Rook sat stiffly at the end of the table, declining wine and glancing at the dining-room clock as if it were a loaded revolver. Wolfe did not mention 8:17. He discussed instead the criminal misuse of dill. When he rose at 7:30, he wiped his lips, nodded once to Fritz, and then returned to the office without haste. Rook and I followed. At 7:38 the telephone rang. I took it. Panzer, Saul said. His voice carried street noise and restraint. Townhouse is lit on 3 floors. I've seen Crail enter at 7:10, woman matching Holt at 7:22. No sign of the nephew yet. Voss arrived 5 minutes ago. They're not sneaking. Storrs? visible in the front gallery, walking around like a maitre d'. Anything unusual? Front door locked after each arrival. No one else admitted. I couldn't get inside without ringing bells. Stay put, I said. We're on our way. I relayed it. Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment. All four, he murmured. An audience assembled before the appointed hour. How considerate. Rook rose halfway from his chair. Then it's happening. Nothing has happened, Wolfe said sharply. Archie, coat. Mr. Rook, you will behave as though you are returning for a social call. You will not betray agitation. Agitation is informative. We left the brownstone at 7:45. The air had sharpened. The sleet had stopped but left the sidewalks slick. Rook walked too fast. I slowed him with a hand on his elbow. If Storrs is staging a parlour trick, I said, you'll want to look less like a prophet and more like a clerk. I'm a clerk, he muttered. Tonight you're also a witness. We reached West 72nd at 7:56. Saul leaned against a lamp post, hat low. He gave me a nod that meant nothing had exploded yet. The townhouse was narrow and tall, stone-faced, with a brass knocker shaped like a sundial. Rook pressed the bell. After a moment, and the door opened to reveal a thin man in his 60s with iron-grey hair and eyes that missed little. Mr. Rook, he said, you are punctual. Mr. Storrs, Rook replied, voice tight but steady. I brought a friend. Archie Goodwin. Storrs' gaze settled on me. Of Nero Wolfe? That's right. A flicker, interest, irritation, calculation passed over his face. How delightful. Do come in. We are nearly at the denouement. The word hung there like perfume. He led us through a narrow hall into a gallery that might have made a museum envious. Clocks lined the walls, mantel clocks, bracket clocks, tall regulators in glass cases. The air hummed faintly with 100 restrained ticks. Leonard Crail stood near the fireplace, broad-shouldered and expensively bored. Miriam Holt occupied a chaise, gloved hands folded, my eyes bright with anticipation she didn't bother to hide. Dr. Evelyn Voss stood by a glass pedestal at the center of the room where the skeleton clock rested beneath its dome. Thomas Dane, younger than I'd expected, pale and sharp-featured, lingered near the doorway. All of them turned when we entered. Mr. Goodwin, Storrs said lightly, you arrive as chronicler. Excellent. Time deserves witnesses. Crail snorted. Is this still amusing to you, Calvin? Immensely, Storrs replied. Dr. Voss's gaze cut to Rook. You told someone. I told Mr. Wolfe, Rook said. A silence fell that wasn't mechanical. Storrs approached the pedestal and rested his fingers on the glass dome. The skeleton clock was delicate, brass ribs exposed, gears glinting. Its pendulum swung with serene confidence. It is 8:10, Storrs announced, glancing at a slim watch on his wrist. 7 minutes. You can stop this nonsense, Voss said sharply. Whatever you've arranged. Arranged? Storrs smiled. My dear Evelyn, you wound the clock yourself at dinner. You examined the escapement. You declared it flawless. That was 2 nights ago. And nothing has altered, he said. Thomas Dane stepped forward. Uncle, what is this supposed to prove? That time is obedient, Storrs replied, if properly understood. Crail's jaw tightened. You're enjoying this too much. On the contrary, Storrs said softly, I am relinquishing enjoyment. I checked my watch. 8:13. Rook stood rigid beside me. I could feel his pulse from a foot away. Mr. Storrs, I said, mind if I ask a direct question? By all means. Do you expect to be murdered at 8:17? A ripple went through the room. Holt's eyes widened. Dane flushed. Voss went pale. Storrs laughed, a short, bright sound. Murder is such a crude word, Mr. Goodwin. No, I expect precision. Precision of what? Voss demanded. He looked at her, and for the first time there was something like fatigue in his expression. Of consequence. 8:15. The clocks around us ticked in layered chorus. Some were louder, some barely audible, but together they created a pressure in the ears. Crail shifted his weight. If this is blackmail... Blackmail requires demands, Storrs said. I have made none. Yet, Holt murmured. 8:16. Storrs lifted the glass dome carefully and set it aside. The skeleton clock stood exposed now, and its delicate works unprotected. He bent slightly, listening to it as though to a seashell. Stand back, Voss said suddenly. Why? Storrs asked without turning. Because if you've tampered... I have tampered with nothing, he said. The mechanism was altered weeks ago. You admired it. Her face drained of color. You told me it was aesthetic. It is, he agreed. 8:16 and 30 seconds. No one moved. Even Dane's restless shifting ceased. Storrs straightened. He looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Crail's suspicion, Holt's hunger, Dane's fear, Voss's dawning horror, Rook's desperate certainty, mine measuring the exits. It is time, he said quietly. At 8:17 precisely, the skeleton clock emitted a single clear chime, and Calvin Storrs collapsed. For half a second after the chime, no one understood what had happened. The sound still hung in the air, pure, metallic, final, when Storrs' knees buckled. He pitched sideways, striking the parquet with a flat, dreadful certainty. Dr. Voss reached him first. She dropped to her knees, fingers already at his throat. Move back, she snapped, and this time no one argued. Crail swore under his breath. Holt rose from the chaise but did not approach. Dane stood frozen, lips parted, as if he had forgotten how to breathe. Rook made a small sound that might have been vindication or terror. I couldn't tell which. I stepped forward, crouching opposite Voss. Well? Her jaw tightened. She shifted her fingers, pressed harder, then leaned close to Storrs' mouth. The clocks ticked on. There's a pulse, she said at last. Faint. A collective exhale moved through the room, thin and uneven. He's not dead, Dane whispered. Not yet, Voss replied. Help me. Crail moved then, kneeling to assist. Together they eased Storrs onto his back. His eyes were closed, his face drained of color. His chest rose shallowly. Call an ambulance, Voss ordered. I'll do it, I said, already rising. The hallway phone was mounted just outside the gallery. I dialed, gave the address, and kept my voice level. When I returned, Holt had joined the cluster, though she kept a careful distance from Storrs' hands. Rook remained where he was, staring at the skeleton clock as if it might speak again. Mr. Rook, I said quietly, did you know about this? He shook his head violently. No, he said he would be dead. You seem disappointed, Holt said coolly. Rook flinched. I wanted it stopped. At 8:17, Crail muttered. Damn theatrics. Voss glanced up at him. This is not theatre. His pulse is irregular. Poison? Dane asked hoarsely. The word settled like dust. Has he eaten? I asked. He dined alone, Holt said. So he claimed. Voss shook her head. If poison, it was taken earlier. There's no convulsion, no foam. This looks cardiac. Convenient, Crail said. For whom? Voss shot back. The siren began in the distance, faint but growing. I moved to the pedestal. The skeleton clock stood serene, its pendulum swinging with indifferent grace. 8:18 now. Don't touch it, Voss warned. I won't, I said. I leaned closer without making contact. The mechanism was intricate, but not beyond human interference. The chime hammer rested still, having completed its duty. "You said it was modified," I said to her. She hesitated. "He asked me to examine it weeks ago. He had altered the gearing, subtly, claimed it would improve accuracy." "Did it?" "It was already accurate." "Did you open the case tonight?" "No." "Did anyone?" I let my gaze travel the room. Crail bristled. "Are you implying—" "I'm implying nothing. Yet." The ambulance arrived within minutes. 2 attendants entered briskly, assessed Storrs, and transferred him to a stretcher. Voss rode with them, issuing crisp medical details as they departed. The door closed. The townhouse seemed suddenly larger, emptier. 8:25. Crail straightened his cuffs. "This has gone far enough. I refuse to be implicated in some lunatic stunt." "You came willingly," Holt observed. "I came to witness a curiosity, not a crime." Dane found his voice. "If my uncle dies?" "If," Holt repeated softly. Rook turned to me. "You saw it. He said he would die at 8:17. "And he didn't," I said. "Not yet," Rook insisted. Crail rounded on him. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Bringing your detective friend." "I sought help," Rook snapped. "Unlike some." "Gentlemen," I cut in, "if we're going to start clawing each other, let's at least wait for confirmation." The clocks ticked. I stepped into the hall and called Wolfe. He answered on the second ring. "Yes, Archie." He collapsed on cue. Pulse present. Ambulance en route to St. Vincent's. "Astonishing," Wolfe said without astonishment. "Cause?" "Unknown. Voss suspects cardiac event." "No visible trauma." "Who touched the clock?" "No one after the chime. Voss examined it weeks ago. Storrs removed the dome himself." "Was the dome secured?" "No." A pause. I could almost hear him rearranging pieces. "Archie," he said, "observe the faces." "I have been." "Observe again, particularly Mr. Rook." I glanced back into the gallery. Rook stood near the pedestal now, hands at his sides, staring not at the clock, but at the space where Storrs had fallen. "He looks shaken," I said. "Does he look surprised?" I watched Rook swallow, his gaze flicking once, just once, to the hall clock mounted near the stairs. "He looks like a man checking the time," I said. "Precisely," Wolfe murmured. "Return at once. Bring Mr. Rook." "What about the others?" "They will disperse. They are less interesting at present." I hung up and re-entered the gallery. "Crail," I said, "you might consider staying available for the police. They'll want statements." He grimaced. "Of course." Holt moved toward the door. "Keep us informed, Mr. Goodwin. I find myself invested." Dane sank onto the chaise Holt had vacated, face in his hands. Rook approached me. "Is he dead?" "Not yet," I said again. "And if he survives, he's going to have questions." "About what?" "About who benefited from 8:17. Rook's eyes flickered. "No one benefited." "Someone arranged an audience," I said quietly. "And someone ensured a chime." He stiffened. "The clock chimed because that's what it does." "At 8:17 precisely," I replied, 48 hours after he announced it. We stepped out into the cold. Saul detached himself from the lamp-post. "Well?" "Chimed," I said. "He dropped. Still breathing." Saul's expression didn't change. "Convenient." "Yeah," I said. "For somebody." We headed back toward the brownstone, Rook between us. Behind us, in the tall townhouse, the clocks continued their layered ticking, obedient to no prophecy but their own. We reached the brownstone a little before 9. Wolfe was in the office, lights low, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together as if in prayer to a private deity who specialized in human folly. Rook hovered near the threshold until I nudged him inside. "Well," Wolfe asked without opening his eyes. He collapsed at 8:17, I said. Chime on schedule, pulse present, taken to St. Vincent's. Voss accompanied. Wolfe's lids lifted. Alive then? For the moment? And the others? Crail angry, Holt intrigued, Dane frightened. Rook here. Wolfe turned his gaze to Rook, holding it long enough to make the man shift his weight. You were disappointed, Wolfe said mildly. Rook recoiled. I was not. You expected a corpse, Wolfe continued. You received a complication. I expected, Rook faltered. He said he would die. And you believed him, Wolfe said. That is the crux. Rook spread his hands helplessly. He was certain. Certainty is infectious, Wolfe murmured, particularly when delivered with theatrical timing. I leaned against my desk. There's more. The skeleton clock had been modified weeks ago. Voss examined it then. Storrs removed the glass dome himself before the chime. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Describe the dome. Glass, hinged at the back, not locked. Could it conceal an apparatus? Possibly. I didn't touch it. Good. Rook stepped forward. Are you suggesting the clock caused his collapse? I suggest nothing, Wolfe said. I inquire. Did Mr. Storrs ingest anything in your presence tonight? No. At dinner 2 nights ago? He drank wine. No, that normally. Wolfe drummed his fingers once on the arm of his chair. Archie, call the hospital. I did. After a brief negotiation with a nurse who guarded information as if it were bullion, I learned that Calvin Storrs had been admitted unconscious, heart rhythm unstable but present. Tests were underway. Poison? Wolfe asked when I relayed it. No confirmation. They're not committing? Wolfe nodded. Very well. He shifted his attention back to Rook. You told me Mr. Storrs valued symmetry. Explain. Rook swallowed. He believed events should align. He often staged acquisitions to coincide with anniversaries. Births, deaths, eclipses. He once purchased a maritime chronometer on the exact minute its original owner drowned. Charming, I muttered. He said time rewarded those who respected it, Rook continued. And punished those who did not? Wolfe asked. Rook hesitated. Yes. Silence settled, heavy but not stagnant. Mr. Rook, Wolfe said at last, who benefits if Mr. Storrs dies tonight? Rook blinked. His nephew inherits. Eventually. Eventually? The estate is complex. Crail holds partial control of certain investments tied to the collection. There are clauses. Clauses that activate upon death, Wolfe pressed. Yes. Financial gain? Substantial. Wolfe turned to me. And Ms. Holt? She wants specific pieces, I said. Storrs refused to sell. Would death free them? Through estate liquidation, maybe. And Dr. Voss? She thinks the clocks belong in museums. If Dane inherits, he might donate. Wolfe's gaze narrowed. And you, Mr. Rook? Rook stiffened. I gain nothing. On the contrary, Wolfe said softly. If Mr. Storrs dies precisely as foretold, you gain vindication. You become the man who knew. Color rose in Rook's cheeks. I never wanted that. Yet you came to me before 8:17, Wolfe said. Why? Because if I warned someone, if there was danger. Danger to whom? Wolfe interrupted. To him. From whom? Rook opened his mouth, then closed it. Wolfe leaned back. You see the difficulty. A prophecy requires either omniscience or orchestration. You are not omniscient. I did not orchestrate anything, Rook snapped. Calm yourself, Wolfe said. Agitation is, as I remarked, informative. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it. Saul stood on the stoop, collar up, expression unreadable. Hospital? I asked. He shook his head. Townhouse. After you left, I stayed. 10 minutes later, the nephew came out. Alone, looked pale. Got into a cab. Didn't go to the hospital. Where? Midtown, office building on Madison. Went in, lights still on. I waited. He came out 20 minutes later with a briefcase he hadn't carried before. That got my attention. Did you see what floor? I asked. 6th, directory lists Crail and Dane Investments. I whistled softly. That's efficient. Saul shrugged. Maybe he needed paperwork. Maybe, I said. We returned to the office. Wolfe listened without interruption. Mr. Dane left his uncle unconscious, Wolfe said, and visited a joint investment office. Could be estate documents, I offered. Could be, Wolfe agreed. Or could be something requiring immediate adjustment before a death certificate is signed. Rook looked stricken. Thomas wouldn't... You are fond of him? Wolfe asked. He's weak, and not cruel. Weakness, Wolfe said, is a fertile soil. The telephone rang again. I answered. This is Dr. Voss, a tight voice said. Mr. Storrs has regained consciousness. I glanced at Wolfe. He is asking for Mr. Rook, she continued, and he insists on knowing the time. I covered the receiver. He's awake. Wants Rook. Wants the time. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Ask her what time he believes it is. I relayed the question. A pause. Then Voss. He says it is 8:17. I felt the room tilt just slightly. It's 9:12, I said. Another pause. He insists, she replied. He says the clock is not finished. I repeated Dr. Voss's words to Wolfe. He did not move for a full 5 seconds. Put her back on, he said. I obeyed. Dr. Voss, Wolfe said, his voice smoothing into its most reasonable register. This is Nero Wolfe. Or date? Yes. Yet he asserts it is. Date? Yes. Yet he asserts it is 8:17. Yes, he says that is the only time that matters. Wolfe's lids lowered halfway. Has he been administered any sedatives that might distort his perception? Minimal. Nothing that would account for this fixation. Thank you. One more inquiry. When he collapsed, did he strike his head? No. Excellent. Keep him alive, Doctor. We shall attend shortly. He signaled me to hang up. Rook was on his feet. He's alive. He thinks it's 8:17. Yes, Wolfe said, which is more interesting than if he were dead. Rook stared. How can you say that? Because, Wolfe replied, a man who predicts his death and survives has either failed or succeeded in a different design. Saul leaned against the bookcase. You think he staged it? I think, Wolfe said, that a collapse at a predetermined minute requires either physiological certainty or external trigger. The former is rare, the latter is accessible. I said, the clock. Possibly, Wolfe agreed. Archie, when the chime sounded, what was Mr. Storrs doing? Standing beside the pedestal, dome removed, he'd bent toward it, listening. And then? He straightened, said, "It is time," and dropped. Wolfe nodded slowly. Did he touch the mechanism? Not that I saw. Did anyone else approach the pedestal between 8:10 and 8:17? I ran it through. No, we were all at least 3 feet away. Voss warned him to stand back. Yet he removed the dome, Wolfe murmured, exposing the works. Rook spoke up. You think something emitted from it? Perhaps, Wolfe said. A sound beyond the audible chime, a vibration, a scent. A scent? I asked. Certain compounds can be released by heat or friction, Wolfe said. The chime hammer strikes. A mechanism engages. A capsule breaks. Rook's face drained. Poison? Possibly not lethal, Wolfe corrected. Merely sufficient to induce arrhythmia in a susceptible heart. Saul grunted softly. That's elaborate. So is announcing one's death to an audience, Wolfe replied. I said, but why risk his own life? Wolfe's gaze shifted to Rook. To test loyalty, to expose greed, to provoke action. Rook shook his head. No, he wouldn't endanger himself for that. You told me he valued symmetry above comfort, Wolfe said. Symmetry can be tyrannical. The room fell quiet again. Archie, Wolfe said, we go to the hospital. Mr. Rook accompanies us. Saul, you will return to the townhouse. Gain entry, if possible. Examine the skeleton clock. Do not disturb it. Observe. Saul nodded once and left. Within minutes, we were in a cab, Rook rigid beside me. The city had settled into its night rhythm, indifferent to scheduled mortality. You think he planned to survive? Rook said suddenly. I think he planned something, I replied. Survival is often a byproduct. At St. Vincent's, we were directed to a private room. Dr. Voss met us outside it. He's stable for now, she said. Her composure was intact, but fatigue edged it. He insists on speaking to Mr. Rook, as he repeats that the clock is not finished. Has he explained that? Wolfe asked. No, only that we must wait. For what? I asked. She shook her head. Wolfe inclined his head. Take us in. Calvin Storrs lay propped against pillows, color returning faintly to his cheeks. Electrodes dotted his chest. A monitor traced his heart's uncertain script. His eyes were open and clear. Mr. Wolfe, he said, voice thin but steady. How punctual of you. You're not dead, Wolfe observed. Storrs smiled faintly. Not yet. Rook stepped forward. You said... I said what was necessary, Storrs interrupted. What time is it? 9:28, I said. He shook his head. No, it is 8:17. Wolfe moved closer to the bed. Explain. Storrs' gaze sharpened. The clock chimed. That was the first measure. First? Wolfe repeated. Yes. A flicker of pain crossed his face, quickly mastered. Time divides. Into what? Wolfe asked. Expectation and consequence. Rook leaned in. Calvin, what have you done? Storrs looked at him with something like pity. I have given them a choice. Whom? Wolfe asked. My guests. I felt the air tighten again. What choice? Wolfe pressed. Storrs' fingers twitched against the sheet, whether to act before the second measure. And when is that? I asked. His eyes shifted to the wall clock in the hospital room, ticking with banal obedience. 8:17, he whispered. Wolfe's expression did not change, but I knew that somewhere inside his formidable skull, a gear had engaged. Mr. Storrs, he said quietly, you will clarify at once. There will be no riddles. Storrs closed his eyes briefly, then reopened them. The clock has not finished, he repeated. It will complete the hour. Where? Wolfe demanded. But Storrs only smiled, faint and infuriating. Behind us, the hospital clock ticked toward 9:30, utterly unconcerned with prophecy. Wolfe did not tolerate riddles well, especially from a man wired to a heart monitor. Mr. Storrs, he said, his voice acquiring the weight it uses to bend stubborn facts. If you possess information regarding imminent harm, you will disclose it now. Your indulgence in symbolism is tedious. Storrs' gaze flickered toward Dr. Voss, who stood at the foot of the bed with her arms folded. Evelyn, he murmured, did they remain? At your house? She asked. I left with you. Crail, he pressed. I don't know. A faint crease appeared between Storrs' brows. They were to have an opportunity. Rook stepped closer. Opportunity for what? For correction, Storrs said. His breathing hitched but steadied. The clock was altered to mark 2 intervals. The chime at 8:17 initiated the first. The second occurs precisely 1 hour later. I glanced at Wolfe. 9:17. Yes, Storrs said, a thin smile returning. You see? You understand structure. What occurs at 9:17? Wolfe asked. Storrs' eyes gleamed. That depends on whether any of them acted. Acted how? I demanded. To prevent what they believed inevitable. The room tightened. You engineered your collapse, Wolfe said flatly. I engineered an inducement, Storrs replied. A minor arrhythmia. Unpleasant, not fatal. I calibrated it. Dr. Voss stiffened. You what? He met her eyes. The mechanism releases a measured vapor when the chime strikes. It affects only those within close proximity. I ensured I was nearest. You poisoned yourself, Rook whispered. Not poison, Storrs said irritably. A stimulant in excess destabilizes rhythm. My heart is strong. I calculated the dosage. Wolfe's expression hardened. You are a fool. Possibly, Storrs allowed, but not imprecise. And the second interval? Wolfe pressed. Storrs' gaze drifted to the monitor, then back to Wolfe. If any of my guests believed I would die at 8:17, they might act between 8:17 and 9:17 to secure advantage. Such as visiting an office to adjust financial instruments, I said. Storrs' eyes sharpened. Ah. Rook looked stricken. Thomas? I suspected him, Storrs said. And Crail, and perhaps even Miss Holt. It each has reason to prefer my absence. So you staged your death, Wolfe said, to observe who would behave as though it were real. Yes. And how were you to observe unconscious? Storrs' smile widened faintly. I was not to remain unconscious. Dr. Voss made a sound of disgust. You gambled with cardiac arrest. I calculated, he corrected. Wolfe's gaze became glacial. You are fortunate that calculation and vanity did not align more closely. I checked my watch. 9:08. Saul, I muttered, and stepped into the corridor to telephone the townhouse. He answered on the second ring. I'm inside, he said quietly. Servant let me in after I mentioned Wolfe. Clock's here. Dome off. Anything interesting? Better than interesting. There's a secondary mechanism wired to the chime assembly. Leads down through the pedestal. To what? Small transmitter, timed. Set to activate at 9:17. I felt the floor steady under my feet again, but only just. Activate how? Hard to tell without dismantling, but it's connected to a relay. Could trigger something elsewhere. Stay put, I said. Do not touch. I returned to the room. Wolfe read my face before I spoke. Transmitter, I said. Timed for 9:17. Storrs closed his eyes briefly, satisfaction flickering across his features. There, you see? Wolfe's voice sharpened. You arranged a remote consequence. Yes. What is it? A message, Storrs said. To my office. A recording will be released at 9:17 unless manually interrupted. Recording of what? Rook demanded. Of a revision to my will. Rook staggered back as if struck. And Storrs replied. If any of them attempted, Storrs replied. If any of them attempted to exploit my presumed death within the hour, the recording would ensure they gained nothing. And how would it know? I asked. It would not, Storrs admitted, but their actions would be evident by then. 9:12. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, instruct Mr. Panzer to disable the transmitter. Storrs' eyes flew open. No. Wolfe's gaze pinned him. You have indulged your theatrics sufficiently. I will not permit collateral damage. It harms no one, Storrs insisted. It manipulates many, Wolfe replied. I stepped back into the corridor and relayed the order. Saul grunted acknowledgement. When I returned, I into test subjects. You mistook suspicion into test subjects. You mistook suspicion for proof. I needed certainty. You needed conversation, Wolfe snapped. Instead, you chose spectacle. 9:15. Rook stood rigid, hands clenched. If Thomas went to the office, he did, I said. Storrs' jaw tightened. Whether from greed or panic, Wolfe added, remains to be determined. 9:16. The heart monitor traced its glowing line, indifferent to philosophy. Storrs stared at the wall clock. It is nearly complete. On the contrary, Wolfe said softly, it is nearly prevented. 9:17 approached, no chime to announce it, only the sterile tick of a hospital second hand. We waited, for each measuring the minute differently. When the second hand aligned at the top of the dial, nothing happened. No alarm, no distant crash of consequence. Only the steady pulse on the monitor. Wolfe exhaled once. Your hour, he said, has concluded. Storrs closed his eyes, and for the first time since we had entered, he looked uncertain. The silence after 9:17 was different from the one after 8:17. The first had been theatrical, suspended on a chime. The second was sterile, clinical, and faintly embarrassing. Storrs opened his eyes again, slower this time. You interfered, he said to Wolfe. Correct, Wolfe replied. I dislike experiments conducted on unwilling participants. It would only have played a recording, which would have altered legal instruments under false pretenses, Wolfe said. You intended to frighten them into revealing themselves. Yes. And if none acted? Wolfe asked. Storrs hesitated. Then I would know they were loyal. Wolfe's mouth tightened. No. You would know they were cautious. Dr. Voss stepped forward. This is madness. You nearly stopped your own heart. I controlled the dosage, Storrs insisted weakly. You gambled, she corrected. Rook moved closer to the bed. Calvin, Thomas went to the office. The words landed heavily. Storrs' gaze sharpened. Did he? Yes, I said. Immediately after you were taken away. Storrs closed his eyes again, but not in triumph, in calculation. Wolfe spoke evenly. Mr. Dane visited the joint investment office shared with Mr. Crail. He retrieved a briefcase. Whether to secure assets or to conceal activity, we shall determine. You see, Storrs murmured, I was right to test. You were right to suspect tension, Wolfe said. You were wrong in your method. Rook's voice trembled. What happens now? Now, Wolfe said, we convert spectacle into clarity. He turned to me. Archie, instruct Mr. Panzer to remain at the townhouse. Inform him that Mr. Dane is to be followed upon departure from his residence or office, discreetly. I nodded and stepped out to place the call. Saul listened without comment, then said, Understood. When I returned, Wolfe was regarding Storrs with an expression I had seen only a few times, one reserved for men who mistook intelligence for wisdom. You will rest, Wolfe said. You will issue no further dramatic pronouncements, and tomorrow you will receive visitors in your townhouse, all of them. Storrs frowned faintly. To what end? To conclude what you began, Wolfe said. Properly. Dr. Voss crossed her arms. He is not hosting gatherings tomorrow. He will, Wolfe said calmly, if he desires to prevent permanent fracture among his associates. Storrs studied him. You intend to expose them. I intend, Wolfe corrected, to illuminate. Rook exhaled shakily. And if Thomas acted out of fear, if he thought his uncle dead and moved to secure his interests, Wolfe said, that is instructive. Storrs' eyes drifted to Rook. You believed me, he said quietly. Yes, Rook replied. I did. Why? Rook swallowed. Because you were certain. A faint smile touched Storrs' lips. Then at least my certainty achieved something. Wolfe rose, an event significant enough that even the heart monitor seemed to pause in deference. Mr. Storrs, he said, certainty is not a virtue when detached from restraint. You engineered a collapse to measure greed. You discovered only that opportunity invites action. "And what do you discover, Mr. Wolfe?" Storrs asked. "That human beings adjust to anticipated loss faster than to anticipated change," Wolfe replied. "Your guests believed you dead for less than an hour. One of them acted. That is not prophecy, it is probability." Storrs regarded him in silence. "We will speak tomorrow," Wolfe concluded. Outside the room, the hospital corridor hummed with ordinary urgency. Nurses passing, carts rolling, the world indifferent to private experiments in morality. Rook walked beside me toward the elevator. "Do you think Thomas tried to steal something?" "I think he went to an office with a briefcase," I said. That's a start." "And Crail?" "Possibly waiting to see which way the wind blew." Rook rubbed his face. "Calvin wanted to see who would move first." "And he did," I said. We stepped into the elevator. Wolfe filled the space with quiet authority. "Archie," he said, "arrange for all 5 to attend at 11 tomorrow. Mr. Storrs, if discharged. If not, the others regardless." "You're certain they'll come?" I asked. "They have invested too much not to," Wolfe replied. The doors opened onto the lobby. The night air beyond the glass doors looked colder than before. As we stepped outside, Rook paused. "If Thomas only sought to protect the collection." "Protection," Wolfe said, "is often indistinguishable from possession." Rook fell silent. We found a cab. As it carried us back downtown, and I watched the city lights blur against the window and thought about a chime that had rung exactly on time and a second one that had not rung at all. "You knew," I said to Wolfe after a moment. "Knew what?" "That he wouldn't let it end at 8:17. Wolfe's eyes remained closed. He is too enamored of structure to permit an incomplete design. "And now?" "Now," Wolfe said, "we examine the design he overlooked." "Which is?" "The assumption," Wolfe replied, "that the only clock in the room was his." The cab turned onto our street. The brownstone waited, solid and patient, its own clocks marking time without theatrics. Inside, the hall clock ticked with stubborn regularity. Wolfe paused beneath it, listening. "Archie," he said, "tomorrow we shall determine who believed 8:17 was the end, and who required it to be." He ascended the stairs toward the orchids, leaving me with the tick of ordinary seconds and the uncomfortable suspicion that for at least one of Calvin Storrs' guests, the real chime had yet to sound. By 10:30 the next morning, the brownstone had been invaded. Wolfe sat in his red leather chair, massive and composed, as though he had invited the disruption for sport. Fritz had been instructed to admit each arrival without commentary and to keep coffee circulating with military precision. Calvin Storrs had been discharged at dawn against Dr. Voss's recommendation. He entered first, pale but upright, refusing assistance. Rook hovered at his elbow like a chastened disciple. 10 minutes later, Leonard Crail arrived, immaculate and faintly hostile. Miriam Holt followed, curiosity bright in her eyes. Thomas Dane came last, carrying the same briefcase Saul had described. They arranged themselves in the office with varying degrees of reluctance. I took my position at my desk, notebook open. Saul leaned against the wall near the door, unobtrusive, but not invisible. Wolfe surveyed them without greeting. "Mr. Storrs," he began, "you staged a demonstration of mortality. You collapsed at 8:17 precisely, as foretold. You survived. During the hour following your presumed death, one of your guests visited a joint investment office and retrieved documents. This gathering is to determine why." Dane flushed instantly. "I had every right." "You will speak when addressed," Wolfe said calmly. Crail's jaw tightened. Holt folded her gloved hands. Dr. Voss, Nand, who had arrived directly from the hospital, stood near the bookcase, arms crossed. "Mr. Dane," Wolfe said, "why did you go to the office?" Dane swallowed. "Because if my uncle had died, immediate action would have been required." "Action of what nature?" To secure certain holdings, prevent opportunistic liquidation. By whom? Wolfe asked. Crail, Dane shot back. Crail barked a laugh. That's rich. Wolfe raised a hand. Mr. Dane, did you believe your uncle dead? Yes. On what basis? He collapsed. There was no pulse at first. Incorrect, Voss interjected sharply. There was a pulse. Faint, Dane muttered. So you assumed death, Wolfe said, and proceeded to the office. Yes. What documents did you retrieve? Dane hesitated. Copies of partnership agreements. Only copies? Wolfe asked. Dane's grip tightened on the briefcase handle. Yes. Open it, Wolfe said. Dane hesitated again, then complied. Inside were neatly organized folders. Archie, Wolfe said. I crossed the room and examined the contents. Partnership agreements, estate drafts, insurance policies. Nothing exotic, but one folder was thinner than the rest. This one's recent, I said. Signed yesterday. Storrs' head jerked up. Yesterday? Yes, I said, scanning it. A contingency clause transferring temporary control of specific assets to Leonard Crail in the event of your incapacitation. Crail stiffened. That was precautionary. Signed by whom? Wolfe asked. By Mr. Storrs, Crail replied. All eyes turned to Storrs. I did not sign such a clause yesterday, Storrs said coldly. Crail's expression flickered. You did, and in my office. I was at my townhouse yesterday, Storrs replied. All day. Dane looked from one to the other. I saw you leave. You saw him leave? Wolfe pressed. Dane faltered. No, I assumed. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Mr. Crail, produce the original of this document. Crail hesitated. It's in the office. Which you visited this morning? Wolfe asked. No. Yet Mr. Dane retrieved a copy. Dane stared at Crail. You told me to. The room shifted. I told you, Crail said slowly, that in the event of your uncle's death, we would need to review our agreements. You called me at 8:30, Dane said, voice rising. You said it was urgent. Rook inhaled sharply. Mr. Crail, Wolfe said. Did you telephone Mr. Dane after Mr. Storrs collapsed? Crail's silence answered. At what time? Wolfe asked. This is 8:25, Crail muttered. Within 8 minutes of the collapse, Wolfe observed, before confirmation of death. I was acting prudently, Crail snapped. Prudence, Wolfe said, rarely requires forged signatures. Crail went pale. Forged? Wolfe nodded toward me. Archie, examine the signature. I held the document closer. The signature resembled Storrs, but the flourish was heavier, the angle slightly off. It's good, I said, but not perfect. Storrs' face had gone from pale to ashen. You attempted to seize control. Crail's composure cracked. You intended to disinherit us all with that ridiculous recording. So you anticipated it, Wolfe said smoothly. You knew of the recording. Crail's mouth snapped shut. Dr. Voss stepped forward. Calvin mentioned no recording to anyone. Not to me, Holt said softly. Rook stared at Crail. You guessed. Crail's eyes darted. He said there would be consequence. And you feared it, Wolfe said. Therefore you prepared a document in advance, a contingency clause transferring control to you in the event of incapacitation. You required only the appearance of his signature. Dane shook his head slowly. You said it was legitimate. It would have been, Crail shot back, if he had signed. But he had not, Wolfe said. Therefore you forged it. Silence fell heavy and complete. Storrs closed his eyes briefly, then reopened them with something like weary clarity. You moved before 9:17, Wolfe said. You did not wait to see whether Mr. Storrs lived. You assumed his death and acted to profit. Crail's shoulders sagged. He was going to cut us out. You do not know that, Wolfe said. Ah, you only feared it. Holt exhaled softly. So the test worked. No, Wolfe corrected. It revealed fear. It did not justify it. Dane stared at the forged document in his hands as though it were venomous. You called me, he said to Crail. You told me we had to act before others did. And you complied, Wolfe said evenly, because 8:17 sounded final. The hall clock ticked behind us, unimpressed. Wolfe folded his hands. Mr. Crail, you will withdraw this document and any copies. You will tender your resignation from joint control of the collection. If Mr. Storrs chooses to pursue criminal charges, that is his prerogative. Crail did not argue. Storrs looked at Wolfe. You have your illumination. Yes, Wolfe said, and you have your answer. Storrs nodded slowly. The experiment had concluded, but the cost of certainty hung in the room, heavier than any chime. For a long moment, no one spoke. The forged document lay on my desk like a mechanical part that had slipped its gear and jammed the works. Leonard Crail was the first to move. He straightened his cuffs with visible effort, as though tidiness might restore dignity. I will withdraw it, he said stiffly. There is no need for theatrics. There was never need for theatrics, Wolfe replied evenly. Yet here we are. Thomas Dane let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. You told me it was precautionary. It would have been, Crail snapped, but the force had gone out of him. Calvin has a history of caprice. Caprice, Storrs repeated quietly. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Crail. Thus, you acted before any physician declared him dead. I acted before anyone else could, Crail retorted. That, Wolfe said, is precisely the point. Miriam Holt rose from her chair with deliberate grace. Gentlemen, this has been illuminating but tedious. Mr. Wolfe, do you intend to pursue criminal proceedings? Wolfe glanced at Storrs. That decision rests with the injured party. All eyes turned again. Calvin Storrs regarded Crail with a look I could not easily name. It was not shock. That had passed. It was not even anger. It was assessment, clinical and faintly regretful. You feared disinheritance, Storrs said. So you sought to preempt it? You engineered a public death, Crail shot back. You humiliated us. I exposed you, Storrs corrected. You endangered yourself, Voss said sharply. And manipulated all of us, Rook added, as results. Mr. Crail has revealed the results. Mr. Crail has revealed a willingness to exploit presumed death. Mr. Dane has revealed a susceptibility to influence. Miss Holt has revealed patience. Dr. Voss has revealed indignation. Mr. Rook has revealed credulity. Rook flinched but did not protest. You, Wolfe continued, have revealed vanity. A faint smile touched Storrs' mouth. I suspected as much. The question, Wolfe said, is whether you intend to compound it. Storrs looked at Crail again. You will withdraw from all joint holdings, he said. Immediately. Crail's jaw worked, then tightened in resignation. Very well. And you will sign a statement acknowledging the forgery. Crail hesitated. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. If you decline, I shall advise Mr. Storrs to pursue prosecution. Crail's shoulders sagged. I will sign? Thomas Dane sank back into his chair. Uncle, You will remain, Storrs said without looking at him. But you will no longer assume inevitability. Dane swallowed. Yes. Miriam Holt regarded Storrs thoughtfully. And the collection? Storrs's eyes flickered to her. It will be reviewed, possibly donated in part. A spark of satisfaction lit her expression, quickly concealed. Dr. Voss folded her arms again. And no more self-induced arrhythmias. Storrs inclined his head faintly. No more. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, the matter evidently concluded in his mind. Mr. Crail, he said, you may leave. Mr. Dane, You will remain to sign a statement affirming your presence at the office at 8:30 and your knowledge of the forged document. Transparency is restorative. Crail rose, face pale but controlled. He moved toward the door without another word. Saul stepped aside just enough to permit passage, his expression neutral. When the door closed behind Crail, the room felt less crowded, though the tension remained. Storrs turned to Wolfe. "You disapprove of my method?" "I disapprove of experiments that presume omniscience," Wolfe said. "And yet," Storrs replied softly, "without it I would not have known." "You would have known in time," Wolfe said. "Time reveals character without assistance." Storrs considered that. "Perhaps, but I prefer precision." "Precision," Wolfe said, "is admirable in clocks, so in human relations it is brittle." Silence followed, not uncomfortable this time, but reflective. Rook cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe, I brought this to you because I believed something terrible would happen." "Something did," Wolfe said. "A partnership fractured." Rook winced. Dr. Voss glanced at the hall clock. "It is nearly noon. I must return to the hospital." Storrs nodded. "Thank you, Evelyn." She paused at the door. "Do not test mortality again, Calvin. It does not appreciate rehearsal." When she had gone, Holt approached Wolfe's desk. "You have restored balance, Mr. Wolfe." "I have merely removed a false weight," Wolfe replied. She smiled faintly and departed as well. Thomas Dane remained seated, staring at the briefcase as if it contained a verdict rather than papers. "Uncle," he said quietly, "Hun, I thought you were dead." "And so you acted," Storrs replied. "Yes. Remember that feeling," Storrs said. "It will instruct you better than any chime." Dane nodded, chastened. At last, Storrs rose. The effort showed, but so did resolve. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "your intervention prevented the second measure." "Indeed," Wolfe replied. "Then I owe you gratitude." "You owe me a fee," Wolfe corrected. A ghost of humor touched Storrs' face. "Of course." He extended a hand. Wolfe did not rise to take it, but inclined his head instead. When Storrs and Dane had left, and the brownstone had regained its habitual stillness, I closed my notebook and looked at Wolfe. "Well," I said, 8:17 wasn't the end after all." "No," Wolfe agreed. It was merely a test of anticipation." "And the guest who knew the time of death?" Wolfe's eyes drifted to the hall clock, ticking with steadfast indifference. "He knew the time of his own collapse," Wolfe said. "He did not know the hour of consequence." I grinned. "That one doesn't chime." "Precisely," Wolfe said. Fritz entered then to announce lunch, restoring the sacred rhythm of the house. The clocks continued their patient work, marking minutes without prophecy or spectacle. As I followed Wolfe to the dining room, I glanced once more at the hall clock. It read 12:03, an unremarkable time, free of drama. In the end, I decided that was the real luxury. A minute that arrived without announcement and left without leaving anyone on the floor. The brownstone was quiet again by late afternoon, but not restored. The restoration implies innocence. What we had instead was equilibrium, earned, not assumed. Wolfe sat at his desk with a sheet of heavy cream paper before him, composing a letter in his deliberate hand. I watched from my desk, pretending to review notes while actually replaying the previous 24 hours. "Archie," he said without looking up, "you are frowning." "I'm thinking." "A hazardous occupation." "I keep circling back to one thing," I said. "Crail was greedy, sure, but he moved too fast. 8 minutes after the collapse." "Yes, like he was waiting." Wolfe set down his pen. "He was. Because of the recording?" "Because of the announcement," Wolfe corrected. "Mr. Storrs declared his death would occur at 8:17. That statement created a window, an hour between presumed death and confirmation, as any man inclined toward opportunism would prepare for that window in advance. Meaning Crail had the forged clause ready before 8:17. Precisely. And he only needed Dane to legitimize access to the office. Yes, I leaned back. So the real test wasn't the chime, it was the hour after. Wolfe inclined his head. You are improving. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it and found Thomas Dane on the stoop, looking younger than he had the night before. I hoped Mr. Wolfe might see me, he said. He might, I replied, if you're not bringing another briefcase. He managed a wan smile and followed me in. Wolfe regarded him steadily. Mr. Dane, I came to say something, Dane began. Not to defend myself. An auspicious start, Wolfe murmured. Dane clasped his hands. When my uncle fell, I believed he was dead. I felt relief. The word hung there. And fear, he added quickly. Relief that the tension would end. Fear of what came next. You're honest, Wolfe said. Continue. Crail called me because he knew I was unsettled. He said we had to protect the collection before vultures descended. And you accepted his premise, Wolfe said. Yes. Did you question why he possessed a document bearing your uncle's signature dated yesterday? Dane swallowed. No. Why not? Because I wanted it to be true, Dane said quietly. I wanted structure, certainty. Wolfe's eyes flickered with something like approval. And now I see that I nearly became what he feared. Which is? A man who acts before understanding. Silence settled, but this time it felt constructive. My uncle will alter his will, Dane said. Not out of vengeance. But clarity. A wise adjustment, Wolfe said. Dane hesitated. He told me something else. He said the vapor released by the clock would only affect him. That was his intent, Wolfe said. But the transmitter? Dane faltered. Was disabled, I supplied. Yes, but he admitted he never tested the full mechanism. He assumed it would not misfire. Wolfe's expression hardened faintly. An assumption bordering on negligence. He understands that now, Dane said. He asked me to convey that he will dismantle the clock. A prudent gesture, Wolfe said. Dane exhaled. I wanted to thank you. Do not, Wolfe said curtly. Thank Prudence, not me. Dane managed a faint smile and departed. When the door closed, I turned back to Wolfe. You didn't tell him the other thing. Which other thing? Wolfe asked mildly. That if the vapor had spread even slightly farther, Voss or Rook might have been affected. Wolfe's gaze rested on the far wall. He will deduce it. And if he doesn't, then he has learned nothing. I sat down again. So what's the final verdict? There is no verdict, Wolfe said. Only consequences. For Crail, he will resign, sign a statement, and live with diminished reputation. That is adequate. For Storrs, he has been confronted with his own vanity. Whether he abandons it remains to be seen. And Rook? Wolfe allowed himself a small sigh. Mr. Rook believed certainty equaled truth. He now understands that certainty can be manufactured. I nodded slowly. He was the guest who knew the time of death. No, Wolfe said. He was the guest who believed the time of death. There is a distinction. The hall clock ticked, so steady and unremarkable. You know, I said, most people would have been satisfied with exposing the forgery. Wolfe's eyes narrowed faintly. Most people are satisfied with surface solutions. The forgery was inevitable once the announcement was made. So the real cause was the announcement. Yes. The crime, I said slowly, wasn't forgery. It was manipulation. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. Indeed, Mr. Storrs attempted to force revelation through artificial crisis. Mr. Crail attempted to force control through artificial documentation. Both sought certainty without patience. And patience, I said, is your department. Among others. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Dinner is served. Wolfe rose, restoring the hierarchy of appetites. As we moved toward the dining room, I paused beneath the hall clock again, but its pendulum swung with indifferent grace. "Wolfe," I said, "if someone announced they would die at 8:17 tonight, what would you do?" He did not break stride. "I would inquire who benefits from 8:18. I grinned and followed him in. The brownstone settled into its evening rhythm, silverware against china, low conversation, the distant hum of the city beyond our walls. No chimes, no collapses, no calculated intervals. Just time, moving forward without permission. And for once, that was enough.